Hi teachers, the math coaches and I are glad you're here for the Planning Small Group PD, so let's get started. Before we talk a lot about planning and that process, just going to walk you through a quick review of the components that are included in small group. Now keep in mind, all of these components do not have to be included every single time you meet with a small group, but these are all of the components that should be included during a small group time. The first one being a warm-up, a review of a previously taught concept, checking back in on a concept that maybe you have been away from for a while, instruction on something that they've learned but maybe you wanted to kind of brush up on because you knew they were going to be needing it for the new concept they were learning, something to just get them ready for that day's small group. The next component being instruction, this being when teaching is happening. It can be directly from you as the teacher, it can come from another student, it can be inquiry based, but this is when really teaching is going to be taking place. After instruction, we have guided practice. This is the we do of math small group when you and the students are working together to practice the skill that is being instructed on. After guided practice, we have independent practice, which again is the time when students are really given opportunities to independently practice in order to demonstrate their current level of understanding for a skill. And the next one and last one being monitoring of student work, knowing that you as the teacher should be listening to conversations, taking anecdotal notes, and then using what you have observed to guide your next moves within small group. So what we're going to do next is we're going to really dive deep into the planning process. So I'm going to walk you through exactly what you will do when you are planning your small group, talking about what I did in my own classroom, what we've done at different grade levels, and what some teachers in our own district are currently doing in order to ensure that they are planning small group in a purposeful and also responsive way that's going to be sure to include all of the components of small group. So what I have pulled up right now is just a quick video that scrolls through the curriculum map. So this is looking at grade 4, second quarter, unit 3. And what this video is just going to show is how the first thing you need to do as a teacher when planning for your small group is think about planning that mini lesson. So when we're looking at our mini lesson, we have to go to the curriculum map to select the topic that our mini lesson will be covering. So time has to be spent looking through each one of these units at the standards that are included. We would encourage you to collaborate with your grade level team to decide on a mini lesson topic. Also, not just looking at the overall topic or that unit title. So for this specific unit, the title is multiplication and division of whole numbers. So instead of thinking, okay, multiplication and division, I know what that instruction needs to include. I know what that focus needs to be. And then planning this specific unit is 3 weeks. So just kind of planning out what you assume should be covered in that 3 weeks. Really taking a look at what your standards are, what the unpacking for those standards looks like, and then kind of putting a plan forward with your grade level team for how you can cover the material that you are asked to cover within that certain time period. So there is a PD in the portal on how to make your mini lesson as purposeful as possible if that is something that you are wanting to gain a little bit more information on. So you will notice in that video, I'm just going to play it again as I talk, that there are multiple standards within a unit. As you look at the map, just know that the standards are not in a priority order. So the first standard within a unit does not necessarily need to be the first standard that you teach within that unit. Instead, that is when you are kind of collaborating with your fellow teachers to decide which standard kind of takes priority for us, which standards could maybe be paired together to teach. And then, as always, keeping in mind that formative assessments will let you know when you have kind of reached mastery for your students within a specific standard and you're ready to move on to the next one within the unit that you're in. So once you have your mini lesson decided, we have an example here just showing that for this particular 4th grade class, the strand or their unit that they're in is computation, multiplication and division with whole numbers. So their mini lesson may be covering the standard 4C3, which we have spelled out there for you. So that's kind of the first step in planning your small group, is planning that mini lesson, knowing what's our strand, what's our unit, what is the whole group going to be learning about before we break into the small groups. Once you have your mini lesson decided, you can use that strand of computation, to decide what 3 groups are you going to be meeting with that day. Remember that you are expected to be meeting with 3 small groups each and every day, your lowest small group within a strand every single day, and it is not an expectation for you to meet with all of your students every single day. So we have an example here with 3 small groups. This teacher may have 4 or 5 small groups, but is only choosing to meet with 3 of them on this particular day. But of course, this 191 to 200 RIT range obviously was their lowest within the computation strand. So this teacher has their mini lesson planned, has it spelled out that they're going to be meeting with a small group in the 191 to 200 RIT range, a small group in the 201 to 210 RIT range, and a small group in the 211 to 220 RIT range. So those again were identified based on NWEA. So in order to find then what is it I'm going to teach each one of these small groups, we take a look back at the NWEA continuum. Again, you'll notice we have highlighted computation since that is the strand for the current unit for this class. And once you click on that strand, it's going to divide your class into RIT range small groups. There is a PD in the portal about how to form your small groups using the continuum provided by NWEA. So if you are wanting more information on that, feel free to click on the PD video in the portal about forming small groups. But once we have the continuum opened, we can look right at that continuum to see what is it that this specific group needs at this time. So within the 191 to 200 RIT range, you can see right here, there are a lot of skills. Some of those skills might not need to be taught. When we think about RIT range, R-I-T, we think about ready for instruction today. But please know that all of the students that fell within this RIT range scored 50% of the questions over these ideas correctly. So it may look like a daunting list, but just know that some of those ideas the students in this group have already mastered. Also know that the skills in the continuum, just like on our curriculum map, do not have to be taught in this order. And just like the standards on the curriculum map, you can go through and find certain skills that pair well together to feel like you're teaching a little bit more at a time. So for the 191 to 200 RIT range, you can see that this teacher selected multiplies 2-digit whole numbers by 2-digit whole numbers. Now notice there, mini lesson whole group, they were talking about division. For small group, this low group may still be working on multiplication. Not every group is going to be ready for the grade level standard. So that's why small group is so important, because it's allowing you to differentiate and hone in on exactly what those students need. Went through the same process for their next group, being the 211 to 220 RIT range. Decided to teach the indicator divides whole numbers up to 4 digits by 2-digit divisors with a remainder. So that higher group is going to be working on division, and including division with remainders. And for the middle of the road group, it's middle level group this day, the 201 to 210 range, they have selected divides multi-digit whole numbers by one-digit divisors with no remainders using models. So you can see how your three small groups can really vary within the same strand. We have multiplication, we have division with models, and then we have division with a remainder. So 3 different levels all within the same strand. So the next thing I'm going to walk you through is an actual teacher within our district and how he went about planning for his small group. So this is an image of his plan sheet, and you will notice that it includes 3 of the small group components, starting with the warm-up, the instruction, the skill, the concept, the strategy, and then that guided practice. So taking a closer look at his warm-up, he has noted that his warm-up was going to be about addition, focusing on that standard algorithm. So he gave the problem 2,316 plus 9,198. He gave himself a note to check in with students to question their understanding of place value when they are using the standard algorithm. So we talked about how that warm-up could sometimes be a focus on fluency. So he's focusing really if they can use that standard algorithm, but he's also checking in that there's an understanding with place value. Next, he went into that introduction of the skill or the concept or the strategy. This is his instruction time. So remember that this was the group that was going to be doing division using models. So they were going to use arrays today to model concretely. He had the problem 72 divided by 3 using an array, and some questions he put for himself. What can I do when my 7 tens will not divide evenly into 3 groups? And a note there to include some instruction on vocabulary of dividend, divisor, and quotient. So he is choosing to do instruction today directly from him. So he is doing the problem, he is modeling, and the students are then watching and listening to that instruction. He ended his small group with the guided practice component of small group. He had the problem 123 divided by 3 using an array again, talking about that vocabulary again, and even looking at the issue of breaking 100 into 10 tens, similar to when he was doing his direct instruction and breaking his 110 into 10 ones on the previous problem. So this is the guided practice, the we do. Notice he is modeling and the students are modeling at the same time. They're working through that problem together. So in his small group, we were able to see his warm-up with the standard algorithm of addition, his instruction when he was directly teaching an array of a division problem, and then the guided practice when they were all working together. What we were not able to see was a time for students to independently show or a time for him to really monitor and write down what he was seeing. This teacher has actually tried to address the problem of really not feeling like he knew what his students were doing once the warm-up instruction and guided practice had been taught, wanting to see more. So his plan sheet actually looks like this. He has landed on a day 1, day 2 model where he's able to go through a warm-up instruction and a guided practice, but then he sticks with the same concept for a day 2 to allow for him to get in the independent practice and the monitoring of student work. So just kind of going through and taking a look at that. On his day 2, you will notice he's going to start by revisiting yesterday's idea. Again, division using an array model. He's going to remind them of what they did yesterday, and then there's going to be a guided practice of the problem 48 divided by 4. So again, they're reviewing what they did yesterday. They're working together on division using concrete tools. And then he's going to have time for that independent practice. They're doing the exact same thing they were all doing together, but this time he's able to check in. You'll notice that he has his notes here. He's able to check in to write down what it is that he's seeing to then use to guide his instruction moving forward. This is just an example of how one teacher within our own district has made the components work. Hopefully you found this information to be helpful.